slow down this.
Right. Awesome. I've really been loving the Ethiopian jazz, and it started, there's a nice little trend of it in the music channel, alongside some other fun stuff that's been posted recently.
Historically, LSIP.
Thank you all for being here. We're really grateful for getting to the week one fireside. It's going to be a bit of a, I think, mellower week in terms of fireside. Every once in a while, I would say 25% of firesides we try to keep as more like internal experiences, and then 75% there's usually a guest. And so this week we have something of a in-between week because the quote unquote guest is really Sid, who is still in formal Sid mode, as you'll see by his blazer. And I do want to give him a bit of an introduction because it's worth doing. You know, he's a Kernel steward. He's available for one-on-ones with people, and he's uh, deeply involved in making sure that KB8 is as good as it can be for everybody. Um, so we're here, we're in week one. The things I want to say before getting into the slides are, you know, it's settling in, hopefully, especially for people who've made it to now their second fireside. You've gotten through the week of intros. You know that those intros still are there. You've probably tweaked your adventure some a bit, maybe figured out, you know, Notion access. I see many people here who I know have attended a convo or hosted a convo. And Kernel hopefully settles in now to a rhythm. You know, every Sunday we'll send out the next module. It's available to you. You might have already clicked ahead. the adventures. Hopefully, you start to get a sense of how your own work finds its rhythm around here. It's very much the priority is that you are are able to find space for your adventure and for the things that you know you want to accomplish. Um, but of course, there are many opportunities for diversions in kernel, and hopefully they are enjoyable ones. This week, the place that we focus our attention in terms of the module is on Ethereum. That's where we are in, I suppose, the history of crypto. So the first module was an introduction to kernel, but it also starts through with trust and the play of pattern, and trust being the number one characteristic of Bitcoin and of decentralized peer-to-peer networks for money. And Ethereum is the first of the forks of Bitcoin that combine that peer-to-peer architecture with a programming language that um, allows people to instantiate different rules to uh, internet monies. And so the suggestion that we make in this module is that because now you have accounts and contracts, contracts being the instantiations possible on Ethereum, uh, it really funnels back to meaning and value as the two main topics of the week, because what we are playing with is programming language that is maximally expressive, Turing complete. These are words that hopefully Sid might be able to help us with, and I'll explain why with his background. But also, yeah, like in simple terms, are rules that we can build. And then what we're limited by is how creative we can be with the rules that we set to the games that we want to play. And if the contracts that we write, i.e., the rules that we build, can broaden our definitions of meaning and value sufficiently, such that things that have been undervalued, perhaps in previous models, we can express our interests and why we think they're valuable now. So to do this type of exploration in the module, which really is an exploration and something that we hope today will be a collaborative exercise, we have value, which is we have value, which is defined as, or at least explored as the idea of something related to truth and trust. But it is a question, I suppose. So I do want to take this chance, as is suggested in the slide, to ask the question in the group and see if people don't mind just putting in the chat, what is value? What does it mean to you? What is valuable in your life that you would be willing to put in the chat? Beneficial, things that are alive feel like they have a soul, something that can't be replaced. Diversity, more than agreement. When you get more back than you put in, nice. Positive output. Something that fulfills a need. I like that a lot. Nice. Delivery of what people want. Very strong definition. I like that. Positive externality, also an interesting one. Numinosity might need a definition, but sounds cool. I love Colleen's aren't revealed until I lose them, like health, or maybe a nearby park, or a neighbor who moves away. Those are huge examples. Time, people, something that does not destroy. Well, I really like Rakshita's that something that is not found in abundance needs. Very interesting. Anything that makes a previous task or idea better by factors of efficiency, abundance, or cost. Something that improves again or is beneficial, thank you, or another. Interpersonal relationships, quite interesting. Okay. Make us feel alive. Awesome. Awesome, awesome, awesome. So I love all these definitions. I think that it also suggests even further that this will be a collaborative conversation because we're curious to explore it together. The suggestion in this module is that trust in clearly shared truths lies at the core of generating valuable interactions. And that trust has something to do with value generation. I think the comments in the chat are even broader, though, and I find that compelling and something for us to tug at as we explore it. While I go down the shared truth train, though, there's this immediate complementary opposite that fiction helps us create shared truths. And this is the idea of like creating rules around games as a means of generating both meaning and value. And an example that's given in the module is the legal fiction of the firm. So when you put some rules around a game, you instantiate them in law, and you say that this is the way that a limited liability corporation functions, then it allows for different types of truth or trust to form, and the enablement of flourishing compounds from there. And so the question that's posed is, okay, so there's LLC, there's also homeowners associations, for example, that talk about neighborhood effects. I like the idea shared there that value could be tied to neighbors. But this idea that our ability to create value has been tied to the way that we tell stories, which help us define truths. So that was at least one definition provided. I kind of want to pass it to Sid now and see if he has any additional thoughts or ways that we might break out into conversation. The place that I want to start is Sid's About Me page, or maybe one step before you go to his website, Cyber Physical Space, and I'll put it in the chat. And you start to see that Sid, beyond being a kernel steward, has so many different worlds that he's kind of meandering through, and it's been one of our favorite parts about interacting with him in kernel. I first met him in the kernel gather after a fireside just like this one in kernel block 4, and we ended up hanging out there for an extra hour. At which point I kind of was just like, wait, who are you? Like, what's going on here? And how are you bridging so many places? So, of course, in that conversation, I got a sense that he's been quite deep down some Web3 rabbit holes. He's done a lot of stuff there. But it became clear that he has like a very deep background in cybersecurity and that that actually was his full-time work and continues to be. He's working in cybersecurity for Singapore's government. He has background as a result in distributed systems. He's been doing things in robotics and VR and is one of the more accomplished technologists that I've spent time with. He also was really, really into communal spaces and education. And specifically, as you might have noticed it, if you saw his comment in the chat even just now, the idea of peer learning was something that he was thinking about uh, as he was entering Kernel before Kernel was a part of the story. And so it's here how, for example, he gave a talk on uh, emerging aspects in education, including how cyber-physical campuses and metaversal learning unfolds, which something that we potentially need to dig into. But more than anything, I think it's just been very meaningful for me to get to know Sid and to be with somebody who's just so deeply kind so regularly. And I hope that many of you get to experience that by just talking to him as the block goes on. He's here, and it's one of the more valuable things I think that that is Sid, is that he's willing to just be with you and listen um, and share. So I want to welcome him to share anything that's with him right now, uh, add to or delete from any of the introduction. Um, I
So,
I think there's
um,
lots.
yeah, we can start from the slides. Firstly, thank you, Vivek, for like that kind introduction. Like, I'll just share my screen again, show you the slides. Yeah, so I'll just briefly go through why my journey um, was a journey of meaning making. Like for me, like growing up, like there was never a sense of home in one physical location. Like my parents are from two different cultures. They have a very unique story themselves, and we were always moving around. So like for me, the sense of home was always found in people, and all the meaning and value that I assigned to the world was in terms of people. So in all the places that I've been, it was always prioritizing people over the place. And that continues to be the case for me. So like my background usually, like it all stemmed from mostly intrinsic motivation, like starting from computer science, which I was fortunate because my mother was one of the first generation of women programmers in India growing up. So that somehow rubbed off on me very naturally. So I was never forced to choose a field that was in vogue or that had more meaning relative to other fields of engineering while I was taking it. And for me, like we mentioned about um, shared fictions. So for me, I wanted to be a scientist. I was always in that student phase of mind, like how can I be a student of life? And science was what I wanted to do, but to find the complementary opposite of science, like applying things and like seeing the evolution of the internet since I was growing up, I figured out the only engineering field with science in its name is computer science. So I'll just choose that middle path and try to explore both things. And that fortunately led me to crypto very serendipitously. So my journey, so yeah, studied at an engineering school in India. Then for the longest time thought that I would be somehow involved in space organizations, and did that through a space organization in India, as well as uh, open source contributions, which introduced me to public goods in the digital space and how people collaborate and coordinate online, and how do they create these shared fictions in the form of code. And like they derive value out of that code. And very serendipitously, my journey in crypto started at a very unlikely place, like in the most um, Web 2 of places that you see on the screen, which is Goldman Sachs, which was, again, like I chose that because of the people that were very kind to me during the hiring process. And yeah, the moment I saw those people that I respected, like transition to other organizations, I decided the same. So for me, it was always about people over anything else. So while I was there, I was introduced in 2016 to this a very funny name called interplanetary file system, like very early on. And I'm like what's interplanetary about IPFS, and what is like why is an organization like Goldman Sachs interested in it? But and then I started to realize that there's more to crypto beyond the financial. There are like really like tangible benefits and value to be derived by just utilizing the technology that crypto provides. For example, IPFS in those days, or and even still, it ensures that there's only one copy of whatever data you have that is preserved on IPFS. So that is meant to save a lot of data for a lot of organizations. So that's that's how I started dabbling into like crypto back in 2016, and came came back to it at multiple points. So yeah, for me, the journey was quite similar to a lot of you. It was firstly about like, oh, how can I buy the right number of coins in the right ratios to maximize profits? That was me for like a month or so, but that got me into the rabbit holes of like, what is money? Like, how do we define money, and how does the world like how do we create meaning through shared fictions in this world? So that's what I've been trying to explore even through kernel. And I was in this exact same place like all of you are in 2021 when Vivek described when we first met in gather, and it was an instant like realization that it kept coming back in the form of communities. So for me, communities never had a like utilitarian meaning. It was always around like gathering people in a public space, like a park in Bangalore, where I used to be, and like just teach them skating for free. And like seeing communities like that evolve into these large structures, like even hyperstructures going forward, where there's many stewards of these communities, and they continue to take these communities forward like every week, even when the original founders are not around. That's what brought me into the whole communitarian community space. And climbing is very special because climbing was the first public goods related effort that I was a part of, where like there's specific principles that you always look out for your climbing partners. You always like have a code of ethics when you're there. You leave no trace behind when you're at the mountain. So yeah, I can just give you a glimpse of that if we are able to play this video. Yeah. So it's a short video that we'll just play. So this is an entire community-led effort. I'm not sure if the audio is coming through. Anyway, it helps me narrate the whole situation. It's just background music. So this was a community effort of 46 climbers, and the goal was to basically gather in a place for a weekend and explore as many routes as we can. So there were a lot of, so there's a, so you can see a shared curriculum in the form of a guidebook. So wherever in the world you go, the local climbing communities organize meaning, and they create value on those mountains by like designing certain routes, and like explore, like keep that alive. And this started back in Yosemite and different national parks in the US back in like the early 1900s, and it's only evolved since then. So for me, like getting like as a techie, getting into these communities started my journey into how do we like gather people and create different sorts of shared fictions. So that's how I started with like communities back in 2016. And besides kernel, I've been very fortunate to have been involved in different local communities wherever I've been. And some of you are a part of some of these communities that as part of KB8. And yeah, like all of these communities, their principles might be different, their values and their membership styles might be different, but like for me, it's about like how do I, like as an individual person, fit into this whole concept of a society, and how do I understand society from its different lenses, which is tech, which was where I started deriving value from and assigning meaning to different things. And then as I got into crypto, like I saw the interdependence between all these different aspects of society, like economics and policy and culture. And that continues to intensify for me because like Web3 and kernel especially, it like helps us look at society or our human existence through many different lenses, including the four that you see here. And that's why like none of us, like I don't think I can understand all of this alone. So that's why conversations and peer learning and having good mentors is important. So like I'm in formals right now. So I'm in a university in Mexico in this conference called the Cyber Physical Learning Alliance Summit. It's part of the Future of Education conference. And like I'm presenting a software that I've designed, which is called Guru, which is just a peer learning environment. So like the inspiration for that name also came from a lot of kernel modules, where Guru doesn't just mean a teacher. It means like a counselor, a friend who shares experiential knowledge, who like is an inspirational source and helps in the spiritual evolution of a student. So yeah, it's a Sanskrit word like consistent across many pan Indian cultures around the world. But yeah, that's the sense I get from different peer learning interactions that we have at Kernel. Like in a lot of ways, like all of us are each other's friends and gurus. And I've been seeing that intensify more and more over the last couple of days, where in this place where I am, there's like this symbiosis of flora and fauna. And we just see people learning within the within this very specific and special environment with mountains in the background. And because the culture or the shared fiction of Mexican culture is so friendly and familial, like I see a lot of parallels with like Asian cultures that I have been most exposed to, which is that care is very important, and like things like love are treated as much as a private good as it can be. And at Kernel especially, like we like call ourselves a community of care, like before calling like ourselves like a community which helps build a better web, or like being a community of practice in different ways. So like my like job, which I have always tried to internalize in trying to serve kernel, is how can I scale care, or how can I like help everyone, like through the use of technology, culture, like economics, all those things that I mentioned. How do I make sure that each one of us feels cared for? And in a lot of ways, like Ethereum, like its history and state is very similar to that, because we can go into a brief um, like background into why Ethereum started in the first place when Bitcoin already existed, or why even Bitcoin started in the first place. So what Bitcoin started in terms of decentralizing like the financial layer of society, like if Ethereum brought the policy part of it, the culture part of it, and like it was more technologically um, fluent in terms of in terms of specifying contractual interactions between um, either humans, which are like externally owned accounts in Ethereum, or like smart contracts. So that's one of the most beautiful things about Ethereum, that they're treated as first-class citizens. So a contract address is a contract address. Like you can send money either to like send money or meaning or value in the form of that contract interaction, either to a person or to a contract. So in terms of that, like we create that very specific sense of differentiation, which is mentioned in the module, and that differentiation between externally owned accounts and smart contracts, while having the same status as a first-class citizen brings so much value to the Ethereum ecosystem. So before Ethereum and Bitcoin, before crypto economic systems, we still had collaboration. Like we still had people who like made internet into what it is when it started off at CERN in 1980s and spread across universities and military bases and then to like homes all around the world. So it started with people trying to design better coordination mechanisms, uh, like in a way that involves peer learning. So in the internet in its web 0, web 1 days was about read, write, like anyone could go to website and like communicate with different people. And then because of business interests, as we move towards web 2, we started to see some of that collaboration being consolidated by specific companies which own that piece of the web. So before internet, we had like broadcast systems. So radio was like the way to broadcast a message. So it was always like a vertical conversation, like some entity powerful enough broadcasts a signal and it reaches like the entire country. So what all these decentralized systems have been enabling us to do is to ensure that we can create peer learning systems as much as we want. And that I would like to ask Vivek at this point, like we are still in the early stages of this idea, but what would a peer learning pattern look like? And how does it like invoke the sense of value and meaning? And like, can we make it into a protocol which gives us special value and meaning as we relate it to this module and kernel?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a great question. It's a great question. The thing that Sid is referring to is the idea that one thing that we're poking around with in kernel is, okay, there's kind of like a very straightforward process here, and it's not something new to kernel. Kernel forked it from something else, but we get together, small group, let's say 50 is the, you can make the rules of the game together. You can say there's 50 people in a kernel block. In this case, thankfully there are more, but we're at 63 on the call. So let's say each cohort is 63 people. The 63 people are mostly pre-vetted by previous people who have joined. That's basically how everyone here ended up here, was because somebody who was in kernel said we would love to spend more time with a person. And so thank you all for being with us in KB8. Everyone in the previous blocks got helped us figure that out. And so that's another rule to the game. Another rule is that there's a distinct start and end time. So there's like a 8-week period that gives us some things, and then there are all these like little customs or custom rules for our game, which are about things like adventures or the way that kickoff starts, the focus on people instead of projects. So each person joins as a person first, and then they do have an adventure. And so some of these rules are custom, but some of them are consistent. And the question is if it's possible to imagine the rules of that game like being put out there into, I don't know if it's meant to be a contract or how exactly it would look, but like, is it something that we can create some shared truths? And rock climbing was another great example. It's like you have some shared truths. It's that, you know, you help people, you don't leave a trace. There are people who are creating the routes for the people that are to come next. And there are all these games that are being have been played for a very long time. So one of the questions with Ethereum will be like, can we instantiate those rules to the game on this public ledger, and can we create creative games that other people want to join as a means of scaling care? But I think Adam brings up a really good point in the chat, and be curious if anyone else wants to add in as well, which is that, like, you know, if we're trying to scale love and care, let's say care specifically, I think is probably the better word, then it is a really valuable thing to try to do, but the question is, like, will these games be interesting enough as alternatives so that we improve upon the existing models in the internet, right? The good news in my mind is that, like, these games that we're talking about designing are mostly competing against news feeds that don't really have as much interest in, they have different interests and incentives. So that's something that's on my mind. But maybe Adam, if you're willing, or if anyone else has any thoughts, we could bring them in, and then Sid can respond as well.
If anyone else wants to chime in, since I already commented. But I mean, like, I do believe you can deliver more care, at least using technology, right? For the same amount of effort or dollars, I should be able to support more people in at least pretty literal ways, like feeding people that need food, right? But I still, at the same time, am wondering, I only have so much love to give in some respects. And if I choose to give it to 10 people instead of 5, I feel like maybe I'm giving each of them half as much, but I'm not sure. But yeah, let me let Rakshita, you want to go?
Sure. I actually had a question regarding something you shared earlier where truth is just shared fiction. You know, if we go by that narrative, what happens to the people who don't accept that piece of fiction? Like, you know, if someone has a different, you know, style of climbing a rock and does not necessarily want to follow what's in the manual because they believe they're an expert in their own way, do they get, you know, left out from that narrative? If I had to, like, you know, basically pull that out into like how the world works, if someone doesn't agree with, you know, someone's extremist views, but say the world is moving, like, you know, in an extremist way, so people who are, you know, more on the liberal side, do they get excluded from the narrative altogether? So what happens to those who don't want to accept that piece of fiction as the truth?
Yeah, we get Ethereum forks, and we get new climbing communities forked into that set of values which aligns to that specific group of people. So I think that's the beauty of having protocols in place. So once a climbing community sets like a guidebook, or Ethereum sets a sense of consensus, it opens up the opportunity for people who may have contrarian views to fork it into their own version of it. And yeah, if there's any alignment, they can align on those things later in the future. And that's what ends up happening. Like, it's like a positive sum game. Like, just having these things out in the open as a public good has positive externalities. And yeah, I think that's what Vivek was referring to with the peer learning protocol. Like, on all our personal websites, can we, instead of having buttons like or comment, can we have like a button which says peer learn with me? Like, can we gather a group of 5 people who discuss that page on that website with me? So can we create these small groups which are willing to have horizontal conversations with each other? And yeah, like, does anyone want to respond to that before I go to Adam's comment?
There's a lot in the chat, so maybe we
Yeah.
see if other people want to add in. I see, for example, maybe Aisha, if you're willing, Dorina, Abidemi.
Yeah, I was just thinking about how I don't know, the word scaling and the word care. I feel like the chat is like thinking about the like connotation and the like all of the associations with the word scale. And the same thing with like connotations and associations with the word care. And they don't feel, at least in my opinion, they don't really feel very synonymous and very aligned. I think scale has always been more of like a capitalist, industrial kind of like way of thinking about how can we reach a lot of people. And that's why whenever we talk about care at school, we don't talk about like scaling care. We talk about developing and like cultivating a culture of care, where it is the norm in a way that everybody feels that they have a part to play in it, and that they receive that and are part of this culture in which they play a part and also receive back care. So I've been thinking about how maybe like scale might not be the right word to use, but maybe there's a different way to frame the idea that we're trying to capture with scaling care, of like creating a culture of care. There's a lot of awesome African words that this reminds me of too. Like Ubuntu is one word that comes to mind. It's I am because we are, and we are because I am. So it's this like reciprocal relationship of like community is defined by the I, but the I is also defined by community, which makes me think of this conversation that we're having as well. So I feel like there's a lot of like indigenous knowledge that we can turn to when it comes to this like scale of care, culture of care, and like what that has looked like throughout the years.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, I'll just briefly respond. Like as much as we can have a culture of care, we should think about how do we create technologies of care, policies of care, and economics of care. And in a lot of ways, crypto has been trying to solve the economic part of it and trying to bring even the culture and policy parts of it. But like as we venture into creating a society of care, how do we like look at all the aspects beyond the culture part of it?
I think I saw George as well. Raise your hand.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, well, there's so many thoughts like going through my head from like the chat and the discussion. There's this Swedish proverb that I often come back to. It goes, "Shared joy is double joy. Shared sorrow is half sorrow." It really speaks to me of a kind of economy, like a nonlinear economy that's like fundamentally different from like one-to-one exchange. Like the idea that just by like sharing something with other people, like you might be feeling some sort of pain and it like dissipates, and you feel that camaraderie, or you might be feeling some kind of joy, and that like magnifies and it propagates in this very different way. Yeah, like in terms of like the idea of care, like I was reading this paper a while back, meaning to finish this. I have a lot of things in my stack that I don't finish, but it was specifically about Yonkers and how like these different communities have like there's a lot of like sort of policy level like decision making that goes around like trying to build resilience in underserved communities. And this was like almost like an iconoclastic exploration of how those communities are very often already resilient of necessity because they don't have access to material goods or capital. But what they don't have is access to other communities that are sort of radically disconnected from communities that do have access to capital. And so it's a pretty erudite exploration of the underlying issues and like why that happens and how to get around it. And one of the conclusions it comes to is that there seem to be like certain communities that start like kind of breaking down those barriers. They have like these people that go between all these kind of like diplomats or cosmopolitans that naturally, one of them happens to go to Colombia or something and then bring something back, and then all of a sudden you see like these like small world networks and they start getting connected, and it starts kind of agglomerating in ways that fundamentally break open the relationality and give like these underserved communities like radically transformed access to material channels that they didn't have before. And that like really spoke to me, I think, on some sense of like, spreading care and that sort of thing.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing. Dave, please go ahead.
Yeah, hey everyone. Thanks George and Sid and Aisha and Vivek and everyone for all the comments in the chat. I think very quickly, I guess what hearing about love and care made me think about something that Lao Tzu talks about, which is the person that tries to be generous is not generous, and sort of thinking about value and meaning. So it had me thinking about like fictions, and if fictions is a way of creating value, what about the value that's pre-fiction? So the sort of truth that is underlying onto which the fiction and the meaning is built on. And I wonder if like care and love and these values are something that's even pre-fiction, where if money is a fiction and money is quantifiable, and when I send 1 ETH to somebody, I have 1 ETH less, and that's why Ethereum and crypto works. But love and care is something where if I give love, I actually maybe grow in love rather than lose. And I feel like care also is something that, in my experience, is something similar. So just something to think about of like truths that underlie the fictions and how that and the meaning that and value that lies there.
That's really cool. John, please go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just like give something a try, not necessarily something that's so well formulated, but yeah, like just thinking about this idea of also like scaling care and just like the kind of political implications of what that world would look like if care was provided by a series of nodes or something like that, or through technology that would that like kind of be complicit with the logic of like neoliberalism, which wants to privatize everything and doesn't really believe in the state. And so, depending on your political orientation, like that could be, a good or bad thing. But I mean, we definitely live under the logic of neoliberalism. And so like, I guess my point is, could we, without knowing it, kind of, be building towards something which would end up destroying, the institutions that we have, which are attempting to kind of provide care, like something like unemployment, or like the expectation that the state will, provide forms of care for us. And, like in a moment like COVID or a disaster, you're like, oh shit, I actually do need those things. I do need support from the state.
Yeah, I want to, because we came back to it, like this idea of scale has been well, and then you brought it up even better, John, this idea of like nodes scaling care. And like there's some type of alliteration going on here that I can't put my finger on, but the scaling care, I know that those are the two words that have been circled around. The first thing was that like a scale as like a scale is like a balancing object, right? And like I know everyone here knows that, but it's something that I find interesting in how the word is being used. It actually came up in our junta yesterday. Kaiso was there, and so was who else was with us? It was there's one other person. He's probably here too. But we had a conversation on simultaneous scaling and this idea of the scale as a balance, and the sense that like simultaneous scaling gives us a different sensation. It gives us a cultivated and a balanced sensation of scaling if what's being like done is basically we're scaling meaningful alternatives. And that's, maybe to me, it goes back to Rakshita's question about the opportunity to participate in other fictions. So the neoliberalism, or whatever the dominant paradigm of the day, the question in my mind is like, do we have meaningful alternatives to participate in, alternative fictions that people ascribe to, that can live well within a plurality of fictions, such that we don't all have to ascribe to the same one. And this simultaneous scaling need not also mean that a state is completely dismantled, but rather that that ultimately we internally achieve a higher state of responsibility for creating meaningful alternatives in our own lives, so that there is this personal agency also alongside a healthy dependence on the state. So the two real ideas there were just like this idea of a scale, not in the technical or technological sense of the word of we need to have a hockey stick, but rather that like we're slowly growing a set of meaningful alternatives. And I just think, John, it's just like a really healthy question to ask. So I appreciate you bringing it up. Yeah, please. And I want to get back to Abhidemi as well at some point, if Abhidemi is willing to share. But yeah, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to quick share quick insight that the word kernel have a care, and it starts with a care, and care goes to root. So it's like it all starts with a care, as it in the root of everything. I had also a quick question to Sid about the project Guru, and it's like in an ecosystem where there is only peer-to-peer learning, is Guru a necessity as the master? I remember this code that states that I don't know if it's related, but it might be that if the disciple is ready, the teacher appear, and if the disciple is truly ready, the teacher disappear. So is the guru or the guide in a peer-to-peer system a necessity at the root of it?
I mean, that's a beautiful question. And like in terms of specific knowledge, as well as common knowledge, like always, like we have physical constraints when it comes to these things, and we have to go through that learning journey to attain that knowledge. And it's always helpful to have a peer, like who is willing to have horizontal conversations with you to teach you that. So like guru necessarily doesn't have to mean like a top-down way of teaching. Like in the original Gurukul systems in like ancient India, it was always about like, yeah, a mentor figure, like with many students, and everyone taught each other. But I mean, there was an element of reverence to it, but it all came from acknowledging like the godliness in each other. So like, for example, whenever we say namaste, it just means I recognize and I respect the sacred in you and I bow to that. So it's always in a horizontal way. So yeah, like my idea of peer learning does involve like everyone to be a mentor. Like we all are teaching each other even through these conversations.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Sid. Yeah, now it's like it explains the code that it says like when the teacher is ready, when the student is ready, the teacher appear, and when it's ready, the teacher disappeared. That the student became the teacher, and the godliness to manifest in him. So it's like everyone start to become like a guru, as it it's just like a process.
I wanted to check if Abidemi had to go. Francisco, please go ahead, and then we can go back to some other stuff going on in the chat.
Yeah, just a quick comment. Thank you, Vivek. I was thinking, based on the many comments on the chat, that I don't really like the idea of scaling care. It sounds too technical, but also by using like network effects, because we all know the effects of social media and the echo chambers when there are tribes that only care because they think like the way they think. If I'm left-winged, I only care about people from the left. If you're from the right, you only care for people from the right. So what happens when in society people have different values? And in reality, people do have different values. I have friends that, I don't know, we care about Web3 and decentralizations, but maybe they put pineapple on pizza and I don't care about that. There are different values. So I believe that care, if we say that it scales, it may be dangerous because it only scales as long as you are part of my tribe. But I'm thinking that what are the means that we have to care about people who do not think like ourselves? Like, how do I still care about you if you have another political opinion? How do I care about you if you're a Bitcoin maximalist? I have Bitcoin maxis friends, by the way. I know that dialogue and democracy, not in the current state, but democracy was about that, like putting people who think differently and agree on something. So negotiation, dialogue, and especially staying humble is a way to, I believe that staying humble and acknowledging that your values are not an absolute truth. That's a way to care for people, even if they don't think or see the world like you do.
For some reason, Star Wars just flashed through my head. Only Sid steal in absolutes. That's very good. Very good. Thank you. Let's see. I want to offer some other people in the chat, Ornella, JP Dean. Minchi as well. If anyone has anything. Sid, go ahead if you have something.
Yeah, I mean, as I'm going through this conference, firstly, it's very easy to observe the culture of a region. So like since the last 2 days, I've observed at least 25 parents or like people who have kids in their life or like nephews or nieces or babies, and they're constantly checking in on them, like if they're okay or not. And that is like a cultural shared reality of this region, which like I really appreciate, which like I haven't seen in many other places, where uh, that sense of familial care, where love is treated as a private good, but at the same time, that manifests in like caring for people beyond the family. So I think when we have those kinds of cultural shared values ingrained, like in our private lives and private goods that we have, it starts manifesting in the form of public goods in how we express care to other people. So yeah, for me it's relevant because like in the age of AI, like kids of this next generation would learn from AI tutors more and more, and that's their way of receiving care. So like they will, like how do we like design those systems such that they still get that human element of love and care, even as they get more personalized attention, more personalized or scaled care that we are discussing about.
All right, there's two hot topics in the chat. One is pineapple pizza, and then the other one is neoliberalism. So we're off to a great start today. Thank you all. I mean, we only have 30 minutes technically left, and we want to make sure we have a bit of time for gather. We can mix pineapples and neoliberalism. I think that might be the next approach. I really do think that conversation is a really a really great one that's happening in there, and it is ultimately like where some of the syllabus goes as a place next. I mean, crypto, for all its faults, of which there are many, and there's, you know, the way that we're talking about Ethereum today, and then there's all the things that have happened since Vitalik gave this first DevCon talk in 2017, which, you know, we could talk about the practicalities of Ethereum and all of the things happening, but where we head next is in these modules. There's module 2 on the global financial system. So we start to look ahead to that, and next week, just to prepare yourself, you will need a wallet to look at the one on money and speech, but you won't need any ETH. You'll just have to connect on Goerli's network, which the Goerli network is a test network, and so it's not any real money, but it is a way to think about money and speech as simultaneous things. The module leans upon a man named David Graeber, who is an anthropologist by background, who wrote a book called Debt, The First 5,000 Years, and speaks for a group and kind of like represented thoughts, anarchist thought, which anarchist thought is deeply prevalent within how the crypto ecosystem evolved, and is, of course, a contrast to neoliberalism. But as the modules go on, we start to look at the ideas of the anarchists who were really big on governing yourself within the context of a world that also emphasizes the need for mutual aid. So Graeber's uniquely positioned because we get into both anarchism and how anarchism and mutual aid are not so mutually exclusive, and maybe have some narrative structure to them that goes beyond what the camps may always think. So it comes up later. We will always have more time for it, but if anyone wants to add anything from like that particular pocket, or from anything else from the module that stood out, actually, really, one person is Colleen, because you referenced a deep cut module, or part of the module, which was these 41, this list of 41 conviviality. And if, Colleen, you're willing to share why you loved that link to the 41 questions, that might be just like a different rabbit hole for us as well.
Sure. Good morning, everyone from the Pacific Northwest. One thing that Kernel is doing in my life is my husband and I at night, I give him like a few things to consider watching or joining me in reading from Kernel, and then we discuss it over dinner. Super fun. We're both from like traditional tech, so it is so interesting to us. He's in healthcare, I'm in climate, and it's so interesting to us to see this evolution in our lives, even in the world, from like working at traditional tech like Microsoft in a long time ago, and then to see some of the ethos and principles that are coming into tech now as we discuss things like these questions. And what we were talking about is not only are these questions like, how will this tech change what I pay attention to? Or how will this tech change what I value? Or how will this tech change how I spend my time? The questions are really, really valuable, but also what we focus our attention on in our own work, you know. So for example, if I'm doing solar, when I bring solar to a small rural off-grid community, how will this tech, this new solar, change their lives, not only for good, but for, maybe bad. Like maybe someone might want to steal this lantern that I'm giving someone else. It really is bigger than just blockchain. And I think that's what is important in my life is blockchain is a means, but like you guys were talking about the culture of care, how can we use it for meaning and value? And that's why I love this kernel, all of this conversation, because I work so much with tech people who kind of lose sight of that. So I hope that helps.
So much. I'm so happy to hear. And yeah, thank you for having us at your dinner table as well. It's awesome. Beautiful. And it's just like it's a very different rabbit hole, and a really meaningful one, that post on the questions concerning technology from the Convivial Society. It'll come back up as the modules go on. Pranay, did you have something?
Hey, hi guys, I'm Pranay. I'm from India. I wanted to talk about, so while we're talking about trying to scale care and love, and while we're in this conversation, we are trying to also, like Colin mentioned, that we're trying to impose what is care and what is love that we understand over let's say a certain group of people, right? So in that context, if you were trying to, let's say, build a trustful space, right? There we need to account for, let's say, self-preservation, deceit, as well as care and love, right? And unless and until we foresee that all of these disagreements and agreements, like I think the model mentions, like the previous model mentions, like quantum thought, right? So both of them being in the same river, not just care but also deceit, so thinking about that, I feel we need to, call it out, talk about that as well. So, for example, we mentioned like anarchy in crypto, right? And that is basically, we as a group think that, okay, the banks are not doing something which is which is from the perspective of love and care. So we are defining our own love and care. So we have separate opinions, and we only agree when the value being created is common, right? So yeah, I just wanted to mention that. I mean, because it's, again, like it's in quantum thought. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah. Most definitely. Most definitely. Yeah, it's the beginning of the trust module. The first line, I just put it in the chat, is liars and cheats. That trust is only meaningful when verification, what does it say? Where verification ends, truth is only meaningful once we've fully understood the ways people can lie. It's very difficult to understand all of the ways people can lie, and it's going to be a continued part of the story for sure. But I think you're spot on that it's something that needs to be brought forward, and like gossip protocols are there for a reason.
That's all from my side.
Nice. Okay, Sid, anything you have, or anyone else? Anything else from the chat? It's been so meaningful today.
Yeah, I saw a related comment on the chat where Danim said, nice to talk about trust in a don't trust verify environment. So like there was a mention in the first module, which was when we encode all the ways and all the ways in which someone could lie, that's when we end up creating more trustful systems. So as long as we push the trustlessness to the machines, that protocols that emerge from that trustless design end up creating a culture of trust among humans. So it's important to have trustless systems or uh, like zero trust systems, as we call them in cybersecurity, to have that culture of trust where humans can trust each other.
Very cool. Yobez, that picture. Oh man, I wish
Yeah.
I downloaded.
George just shared a very
Yeah, I just shared this with a
One-
friend of mine because the conversation made me think of it, and we were talking about stuff really related to this yesterday. Um, it's somebody that's egging me on with like kind of like artisanality and like this idea of doing a lot of things in person and like having high dimensional interactions and stuff like that. This is from Douglas Rushkoff's Throwing Rocks to the Google Bus. I think Rushkoff gets mentioned in the handbook some, like it's in the appendix somewhere. But like yeah, like this idea of like splitting things between like artisanal industrial, digital industrialism, and then digital distributism. He's like kind of an advocate for that like sort of P2P like mentality, and that like spreads collaboration and sort of equitable networks and stuff like that. But there seems to be like a really natural tension between that side of things and then the artisanal side of things. It's almost as if like the in-person interactions kind of sustain the distributism, and unless you have them, there's like we're like in this murky fog where like we're leaving the industrial and the digital industrial. And like on one side, there's like, the heavily like kind of online, kind of disconnected digital interactions. And on the other hand, there's like the very in-person, like local interactions. And so it makes me think a lot about that kind of like that tension between those two poles, and like kind of how we negotiate that these days, or like what the way to do that would be.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Yeah, it's a very specific moment in time. Love that. Yeah, we had Rushkoff in module 5 or in KB5, and I distinctly remember the last thing he said, which was that I don't really know what this whole kernel thing is, but I had fun. And he is represented in module 3 of the syllabus, specifically on a brief that we called the present time. And it's the brief that tries to focus on attention and time and that particular part of, I guess, where we are in internet time. So yeah, I guess, some sneak peeks ahead. A global financial system next week, heavily influenced by Graeber. Take back the web, which are kind of strong words, but that was the narrative very distinctly in 2017 and 2018. And Rushkoff is referenced, and the attention economy, and it kind of gets into that. And then by the time we get to modules 4, 5, 6, and 7, we're kind of looking forward to internet age institutions, to tokens as representations of facts, as like the broadest definition of tokens, scaling principled games, and ultimately the gift. I think just to touch on the gift, I suppose, is there's a really good last thread that I think Aisha and Minchi were talking about, which is like care to whom and under what circumstances, and maybe there's more that could be said there. But the gift is the module that most, I guess, outlines our thought on how gifts actually function, and this transition to that, George, that you're talking about in many ways is a transition from a market economy to a gift economy, not necessarily all the way, not saying that one is better than the other, in the same way that complementary opposites tries to represent that there is no right answer, but that is the shift that is being suggested by Rushkoff and some others. And so, yeah, just really appreciative of everyone in the chat of that conversation around care, and a really important reminder that that is not something, care is not something really that can be given without consent by any way. So it's just a really important reference point. So yeah, that's where we are in kernel. Are there any responses or thoughts, last thoughts from anyone? Okay. Cool. Okay. So there's this part of kernel. The other part is very much focused on your adventure. Many people have posted updates in the Kernel Adventures channel. We ask that you keep doing that, and any updates that you share between a Thursday and the following Wednesday, we as stewards, it's our job and we're trying our best. We respond to as many of them as we can, and we set you up for office hours on Wednesday. So if you put something in there, our job is to try to get you set up with somebody to talk about your adventure at office hours on Wednesday. So you have from now until next Wednesday. Any update, we love to hear them. We want to see the craft that you're working on develop, and we want to be a part of it collectively. I speak hopefully for as many people as are interested, and that's an ask for sure, that if you see an adventure that posts something that you're keen on or you feel like you can contribute to or make a connection or be there for a user testing study, please consider it. And yeah, we're still early, but I want to put at least in people's mind that probably like 3 weeks from now, we're gonna offer kind of like a mid-program expo, and we'll share more about it over the weekend in the next like Sunday update. But expo is kind of like a mid-block custom where we offer the chance to share your adventure slightly more externally. It's still like mostly peer mentors and probably peer mentors and past fellows, but it's kind of like science fair style. We do it in the Gather, and it's a fun event halfway through the program. So that's the next like big marker around mid-February. So we still have like, 17, 18 days. There's no explicit preparation that we ask for. We leave it open-ended, but just know that you have that as an option coming. Awesome. Okay. Sid, any last words from you? Anything else that you see that you'd like to touch on? Thank you for sharing who you are a bit more with everyone. Hopefully people feel like they know Sid a little better after today.
Yeah. Like for me, like, and whenever I talk about scaling care or caring, like for me, especially in the context of kernel, like for Vivek, Alia, Angela, and me, like it's about how do we make sure that we are there for you in the best possible ways, especially as we go through the next weeks where your adventures get more defined and you will start expressing specific asks or like how can we care for you. And I think the act of receiving care that I think Alia and Denimim are discussing in a chat thread, they're having a lot of fun in that chat thread with OB joining. Yeah, so yeah, like that's why we have the kernel asks channel where you can just ask anything that you want, and we'll know how to. We'll try our best to make sure that you feel cared for. So yeah, that's the thought I would leave everyone with, and see you in the subsequent office hours and firesides.
Good. All right, everybody. An option, if you want to pop in the Gather for a few, to hop over there, we'll be there for at least a few. I'll put the link in the chat. If not, play a little song here, as always, to wrap up. The question is, what song will be played? But take care. We'll see you very, very soon.
የማንተዋወቅ ምናልባት ካላችሁ ጌታቸው መኩሪያ ነኝ። የጥንት የጠዋቱ እኔው ልንገራችሁ 44 ዓመቴ ሙዚቃ ስጫወት 44 ዓመቴ ሳክስፎን ስጫወት እግዚአብሔር ይመስገን አለሁ በጤንነት። እግዚአብሔር ይመስገን አለሁ በጤንነት። ቁመናዬ ቆንጆ ደስ የሚል ሸበላ፣ ቁመናዬ ቆንጆ ደስ የሚል ሸበላ፣ ቦርጭም አያሳጣም ብበላም ባልበላ። ጸጉሬ ሸብቶ ትንሽ ቢያሳጣኝም ጎበዝ ነኝ ጠንካራ፣ ገና አልደከመኝም ገና አልደከመኝም። ሲያደንቁኝ እሰማለሁ ሰዎች በቁም ነገር፣ ሲያደንቁኝ እሰማለሁ ሰዎች በቁም ነገር ብለው ይጠሩኛል ጌቾ ነፍስ ነገር። እኔም ታዲያ ሙዚቃ ሕይወቴ ብዬ መርጫለሁ። ሳክስፎን መጫወት በጣም እወዳለሁ። እስቲ አንድ ሙዚቃ ላጫወታችሁ። ትዝታ ይሻላል ትዝ ያለኝ የጥንቱ፣ የቱን መረጣችሁ? በሉ ተደሰቱ፣ በሉ ተደሰቱ። ትዝታ
Have around 7, 8 people.
What did you say?
I said we have around 7, 8 people in Gather, and
Okay.
yeah,
Okay. I was
they
writing.
found their groups.
Okay. I was writing a note on gratitude, so I may pop
Oh.
in. There's so much good stuff in the chat to go back through.
Yeah, I found it really interesting that one slide that I had is care a public good ended up sparking like that focused discussion on scaling care.
Yes. Hi, Lonnie. Also, so happy
Yeah.
you stuck around for the jams.
Hey.
Yeah. Hi.
I also, it's just, yeah, we got the party people now.
I didn't know everyone else
Yeah.
was gone. I was just listening.